Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Version 1, a podcast where interesting people come to talk about their creative processes, imposter syndrome, inspiration, failures along the way, and much more. I'm your host, Waverly. We are at My Friend's Basement Podcast Studio in Brooklyn, New York. Follow the show on Instagram at Version 1 Podcast and subscribe to our Substack, version1podcast.substack.com. And you can also find me on buymeacoffee.com/Waverly Colville. You can listen to this episode normally or head over to YouTube to watch the video version and leave a nice review. I am here with my guest this week, Jessica Richards. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much
I'm
for
so
having
excited
me.
to have you here.
Wow, thank you.
You do so many interesting, cool things. Can we just start with having you introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm Jessica Richards, and I am going to start by saying if I was speaking amongst friends, I would introduce myself as a style storyteller. But if I was applying for a job or if someone was speaking to me from a corporate office, I would say I'm a brand consultant.
And what exactly is involved in all of those things?
Sure. So I think that if you were to look at my portfolio, it's not typical of someone who has followed one path and really mastered one thing. I really love having a wide breadth of opportunities to speak to styling and fashion. I mean, ultimately, I do really work in the fashion space. And now I'm branching my business into more of the spirituality and wellness space as well, taking some of the learnings that I've had and translating them there. But what I master in is really finding ways to storytell, both on a personal level as well as a brand level through stories of branding, through marketing, through styling, and then ultimately what I'm most known for, which is trend forecasting.
That's so cool. Were you always into both fashion and spirituality, even when you were a kid?
I think that, I'm from outside of Boston, so I do think that you're born with sort of an innate draw to witchiness and all things witchy, even if you're not exploring it personally. You might be going on field trips to Salem, or you might have exposure to things that are in the realm of spirituality or in esoteric kind of materials, more so than other people or other parts of the country. But I really loved fashion from the time that I was growing up. And the way that I got into fashion and the way that I was learning about it when I was a teenager or moving through high school is, first of all, through magazines, which were my first love of fashion. I was so into magazines. I loved getting to the editorial spreads and seeing the way that everything was styled and put together. And I really wanted to be in the fashion industry. I was always strong in writing, so that's what I went to school for, and that's how I thought I was going to enter the industry. But the other way that I was super into fashion was working at the mall, which was the coolest thing. I worked at the grocery store. That was my first job, and I saved up enough money to buy a car so that I could work at the mall. So that was sort of my two inroads into the fashion industry.
That's so cool. I love that you kind of grew up around spirituality just by extension of growing up in Massachusetts. Yeah. I grew up in Buffalo, which is close to Lilydale. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Okay, it's I might not describe this with 100% accuracy. My understanding of it is it's like a town of a lot of spiritual mediums and psychics in upstate New York.
Yeah.
There's some history that I don't quite remember, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I think a group of I think it was during kind of the Salem era where basically witchcraft or burning women at the stake was a thing, And so I think a group of people left whatever area they were in and kind of created their own community.
Yeah.
And then that ended up being Lilydale. And you could still go there to this day. And it's a town full of spiritualists and mediums and things like that. And so that was kind of my version of it.
I love that. And I want to say something because we're going to probably touch upon it later too. One of the reasons why I love talking about spirituality in the wellness space is there's so much fallacy that's created around it. And the first one that I'll point out is no one was actually burned at the stake at the Salem witch trials.
Wait, really?
No.
Wait, what actually happened?
Well, there were horrific deaths, but this is one of those romanticizations of what that space looks like through lore that's come down. But no, most people were killed in other ways. Let's not go down
Oh my
a dark road
gosh.
just yet. But yeah, there's a lot of fallacy around the witch trials.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's a whole nother rabbit hole.
That's a whole
I bet.
other episode.
That's crazy that phrase is so like common and colloquial, but it's not even historically accurate.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, cool. That's definitely something I'm going to have to like Google later for sure. So as you were getting started in the fashion world, how did you figure out that you could combine your two passions for fashion and spirituality?
Sure. I mean, I would love to go backwards like a lot in time to kind of go through my very unconventional path. I went to school, like I said, for magazine journalism because as much as I wanted to get into fashion, I don't sketch. I don't really have like any artistic skills. So with the little knowledge that I had of the fashion industry, I knew that that was my inroad because that's where my skill set was. I was really great at communications. I'm an excellent writer. So that was going to be my focus. And also when I was going to college, it was 2002. So it was like really when the height of magazines was starting to come through. That was like
17. People magazine.
Yeah, Jane magazine. Like even I remember being in college and one of my professors actually freelanced for People magazine. I thought that was so cool. You know, it's like, oh, they're connected to the real magazine world. I always wanted to be a writer from the time that I was young, but that was to me how I was starting to form my role in the world and where I was going to go into the industry. And so I studied magazine journalism. At the time that I was going to college, I was also, like I said, really working in retail and learning about retailing from that angle, right? You're a sales associate. And then I was such a hustler. It was like, okay, you're also an assistant manager, you're a key holder. And I was interested in all of the metrics of the business. So not only was I selling, but I was understanding how to set floor sets and I was understanding how to set up windows and I was reading all of the sales projections every week. So there was something also happening in my head with not just the fashion itself or the creation of you know, what these store floor sets would look like. But then ultimately, how are we going to translate and excite the consumer to be a part of that brand? So I was sort of giving myself this dual education of, you know, kind of like in the ivory tower, writing and expressing myself through communication. But when I was going to work, I was learning how people shop. And so it's really fascinating to look at it now, like 20 years later, and just see how important both aspects of that were in the creation of my career. So when I graduated from college, I was still in Boston and I was still working in retail. And I just knew if I had stayed very much longer that I probably would not be able to live my dream. And I was really excited to figure out whatever it is that I was going to do. So I crashed on couches for a little bit in New York City. And one day I got a call from one of my friends from college. And he said, "Are you free for a job tomorrow?" And I said, "Yeah, what's the job?" He worked for a company that was very connected with HR agencies. So they were constantly looking for like people to just fill seats. The job was to work at LVMH.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, on the Christian Dior corporate office floor. So I was one of 5 seats with the president of North America, her assistant, the vice president, and her assistant. So ultimately, it was like being thrown into the Devil Wears Prada at the time.
Wow.
It was so strange to me because there I was in my little Forever 21 pencil skirt and my like heels like hobbling in. And I couldn't believe. And they just really were looking for someone to answer the phone. But having that on my resume as the first job that I did, even if it was a temporary role, was so impressive to the next group of people that I was meeting with. And so I had this really fun first experience. I was like, well, maybe it's assisting. Maybe that's how I get into the industry. Maybe that's how I get exposed to people. And so I went in a more permanent role to a North American retailer. And I was the second assistant to the CEO. And while I was starting there, I was maybe there for 6 months. And the someone came in to interview for a job and they said, this is kind of a weird job for someone that is so young. Like, what are you doing here? And I had like this really short, cool haircut. And I was like, probably wearing some like crazy outfit that was not appropriate for, an assistant of a CEO of a company. And from there, that person took a role to be the head of design, took me with her, and she became my mentor. And that was the beginning of like my real career. It was just such a strange trajectory because I was so used to saying yes and finding myself in these situations that, I was like, oh, it's boring. But like, I know that somehow this is going to lead me to where I need to go. And I think about it now and I'm like so out there and I'm so creative. But the first probably year of my career, I was sitting behind a desk as an assistant.
Wow.
So yeah. So you have to say yes to even the strangest things for connections. I, from there, worked in the design department, and I can't stress this enough. I have no artistic skills. So I couldn't learn how to sketch. I couldn't learn how to do tech packs or like really do any of these tangible skills that the designers and the product developers could do. So instead, what I focused on was what was happening on a more senior level, which was concepting. It was building boards to lay the mood of what the collections were going to be. It was working on color palettes. And part of that was going with the leadership of the team to trend forecasting presentations. No, I had no idea what the fuck that was. Like, I was just like, that sounds so fascinating. What are we about to do? So again, here I am in like the teetering heels and the Forever 21 pencil skirt going to see these trend forecasting presentations. And if you're aware of this in fashion, and I'm sure they still do it, but back in the day, again, like 20 years ago, you would go in to see Trend Union, trend forecasting presentations. And this woman who is like the pioneer of trend forecasting, her name is ELLE, would be doing these presentations around the world. And every industry would come to see it. So you would have everybody in fashion in New York, but she has overseen trend forecasting for car companies and restaurants. And like she is the trend forecaster, ELLE. And so I was fascinated, first of all, that this was a job, but then to sit and watch her presentations and also take in the information and think like, are these people getting like, what are they getting from this? Like, how are they translating this into a commercial way? So I would go back to the office and see how the teams would use the colors or how they would use these really esoteric descriptions, like it's about a blade of grass, like writhing in the wind. And I'd be like, well, what the hell does that mean? Like for, like mid mass market price point jeans, you know what I mean? Like it was so fascinating to me. And so for years, I was working with the concept teams and learning how to develop all of these mood boards and concepts. And it was something I was really good at. And I always liken it to being on a Ferris wheel. It's like once you get on, like you just kind of go through the cycles and the seasons, and you're always guessing what's going to happen next. You're bringing in information from what you know and what you see and continuing to like grow and do trends and concepts in that way. I'll also point out the world was not super chronically online at that time. So we didn't have the deluge of information that you have now. You don't have so many sources of social media or TikTok videos or trends and trends and trends happening. There wasn't that level of information that was just barraging you from all directions. We'd have these really high level shopping trips around the world. We would have the trend presentations. There would be these giant, beautiful books that would come in from trend forecasting agencies, but you didn't have to dissect or second guess in the way that you probably would now. Mm-hmm. In the I want to say like 2012, 2013, I started working as the director of color and concept for a private label division of a department store group. And that department store group had stores from luxury all the way down to mass market, and it covered across North America. I'm like, guess who that department store group is? I'm not going to say. But I was overseeing the color palettes and the styling direction, and really just focused on trend forecasting and talking about in all of the different divisions where you could see the trends going and how they would translate into different product categories. And if you know anything about private label, it's mostly commodity product that's high margin and it's really driving the sales. So go back to that time of me working in retail on the sales floor and thinking about how people were buying things and how we were able to turn numbers. That was the intellect that I brought into that role, was really like watching how people would react on the sales floor. But now what we were seeing is that there was an interest in having a fashion level up, and we could do private label that was a little bit more fashion directional. And you see that with Target. You see that with some of the larger mass market stores. Nordstrom has a lot of private labels that are very fashionable. So this wasn't so new of an idea, but it was new for this group. And the more that I was exposed in that company, the more I would find myself being asked to present to buying teams that were buying from the brands, or I would be, kind of going into vendor meetings and taking a look out to see what they had and putting my input on that. So I really became known in that group for trend forecasting specifically. Down the road, I would be the design director for specific categories, but I would also be looking at apparel and making guidance on apparel and men's or whatever other categories that were not necessarily mine. So trend forecasting has always been my specific wheelhouse.
That's so cool. That's something that I think a lot of people that are not in the fashion industry don't necessarily know about, but it sounds like it's like you have so much power behind you because you're convincing companies like, okay, invest in this direction, invest in that direction. Like, it sounds like you wield so much. Like, yeah, I don't know, like if power is the only word I can think of.
I love the phrase wielding power. I will take that. As that could be another one of my job titles, power wielder.
When it comes to trend forecasting, what are the factors that you take into consideration when you say, hey, I predict this style of jeans or this color is going to be in Vogue in, 6 months or a year from now? Like, how do you like even, what are the things you take into consideration?
Sure. Okay. So I will say that just to bridge where we are now and where I was then, in January of 2020, I was laid off from my corporate job. And by March of 2020, clearly the environment of the world looked very different. And I had alliances and partnerships with different like nonprofit groups or different vendors that were out there. So with the world sort of a captive audience at that time, and me being very bored, having been unemployed for 2 months, I started putting together my own trend forecast. Like, where are we going to go with all of this? Like, we've all been locked up. What will happen? What are people going to be shopping for? We don't even know if we could be outside next week. We could be outside next year. Like, there were so many unknowns. People were really seeking information. So when you're asking about trend forecasting and where I get my information from, the biggest source of information is how are people living right now and what is it that they need or want? And for me, the thing that I think is special about what I do and how I do it, it's a very storytelling based way of presenting trend. I will say that a large division between what I do and what people sometimes are looking for, that I wouldn't necessarily be a good fit for them. A lot of people talk about using data or using metrics around here's what people are searching for on Google. In my mind, that's going to be so over by the time that you can influence product. I also believe that using data at that level continues to feed a fast fashion machine that is so detrimental to this earth. So just taking a breath and thinking about like humans and human behavior, the zeitgeist in which all of this behavior is happening, those are the main influences that begin the story of what I'm starting to tell. Also, if I'm depending on the client or where the information is going, I could be saving photos that I think I'm always saving photos, but you think this is going to be relevant in 6 months. This is going to be relevant in a year. This is going to be relevant in 18 months. I just like to get the straws in the wind of what feels like where people are going and when is the right time to pull that lever. This is a very sentient way of doing trend forecasting, and I still highly believe in it. I think that a lot of industries are looking for something more concrete and solid answers. And I think we've moved away so much from like human intuition and human knowledge that it's very clear where things are going. I think if you take a breath and just like think about it and start to tell a story and start to tell a why. One of my favorite stories is, it must have been 2021. We were starting to come out of lockdowns. People were really getting ready to be out there again. And I did a large trend around what I was calling shoes that go clonk. And like, as soon as I say that, you know what I'm talking about. It's like, it just hits you like, okay, yeah, that I know what kind of shoe that is. Like, tell me more about that. Well, you've been locked in your house. You've been in your slippers. You've been in your socks. You know, everybody's been wearing sweatpants. You were going to want to put a pair of shoes on and like go clonking out of the house, clonking down the street, clonking into the world. Like, I'm here and I'm being seen again. And all of those like Versace Bratz gigantic shoes started coming out, and it made so much sense to me. And as soon as I said that phrase, like I watched people, even with you, it was like, it just clicks, like exactly what and why that would be happening. And that's to me how you do the best kind of trend forecasting, is just giving the why, because then I'm also empowering you. If you're a buyer, if you're a retailer, you can take that information not only to choose the product that you're going to put in your assortment, but that you can use in your marketing stories. I'm surprised no one actually put shoes that go clonk like on a campaign or anything. To me, I was like, that's so powerful. And it really told the message in like such a short phrase. So to me, a lot of human behavior is what guides the conversations and what guides the trend forecasting.
Yeah, it sounds very intuitive. And I think it's very interesting. You kind of look at sort of like, okay, everyone's in their house, so they're going to want like these big like shoes that they're excited to put on and go outside. Or so it kind of seems like you're kind of like seeing where the pendulum is swinging and also just using your intuition as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
When I started doing my trend presentations, I was really fortunate because I had an opportunity where a journalist from the New York Times reached out to me. She had been watching my presentation and said, I want to do a story around your trend on headbands. And it was this trend I had done about wearing double headbands. And it was, people were going to be having parties on Zoom. They were going to, it was transcending like, oh, being ready for work or accessorizing for work. It was like, you're gonna have to be decorated like from the shoulders up. Like, what could that look like if you were really trying to like step out and do something really fancy? And at the time, I also was dealing with how horrific the state of the world was. And I couldn't believe that I was going to be in the New York Times talking about headbands of all things. Like, it was such like a crisis of like morality for me. But that's it, right? It's like finding the ways that the things that we buy give us joy and like really have some sort of significance, because maybe the person that's wearing two headbands was like throwing a big birthday party for themselves on Zoom on like one of the most dark times of their entire lives. So I try to also connect consumerism with like real human emotion and the reasons why, and also make that part of the storytelling as well.
I love that. That's fantastic. As a trend forecaster, what are some things that you're seeing now and you have predictions for next year?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'm like trying to think about what I'm going to say on the air, because I'm also, under embargo with people that I work with.
Gotcha.
I will say a couple of things. One of the spaces that I work a lot in right now is fine jewelry. So at the time of this recording, a large engagement has been announced. So it's interesting to me how that will translate into what engagement rings look like in 2026. I'll give you a little sneak preview, but there's something with, clearly it's Taylor Swift, but we're also looking at Cristiano Ronaldo being engaged. And I mean, like, both of those rings were gigantic. So in the fine jewelry space, there's also something happening where you have naturally mined diamonds and lab-grown diamonds. And lab-grown diamonds at such a large size are a lot more affordable than the mined diamonds. So I think it will only shift things in the lab-grown space even more, because there is this dedication to size happening in such a big way. I mean, you look at those two rings. And so I think there'll be a shift in the market towards lab grown, just because size will be a huge dictating factor right now.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's not the other thing with trend forecasting is like, I'm here to report the news. I didn't choose this. And so sometimes the clients don't love what you have to report on. And I'm like, I'm just the reporter. I didn't choose for the
Yeah,
things
you're
to
just
go
like
in this
looking at what's
direction.
happening in the
Yes.
world. You're not like, you didn't make Travis buy that giant ring.
Don't shoot the messenger is like my number one. Sometimes I'm giving a presentation. I'm like, sorry, I did not choose this. But it's also great because it really leads to a lot of problem solving, right? So if I was in the natural diamond space and I'm seeing that happen, then I know that there needs to be more language, there needs to be more marketing initiatives, there needs to be more education happening, explaining the why you would go in that direction versus. So there's so much opportunity. You can never look at something and be defeated in the trend forecasting space. It just opens up in the other part of the binary, or it just creates more of a dialogue of how are we more inclusive in our assortments too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because trend forecasting is essentially taking past and present clues to provide clarity of what's happening in the future. Do you ever use astrology and tarot and some of those other tools that you have in your spiritual skill set in your trend forecasting practice?
Yes, I love this. So you had asked about spirituality earlier and how I incorporate it into my business. So maybe I've always been interested and I've always explored the wellness space in a personal way. I've gone to rituals. I have readers, I have healers that I see. But in the past few years, it's something that I wanted to take from a personal interest and include it in my business. And although it doesn't have a natural through line yet for many people, I like to say, like, if I am feeling a straw in the wind that we're moving towards something, I have a Gemini moon. If anyone is into astrology, like they would understand, like the way I see myself is really, I like the nuance of education and knowledge. And so for me to do something, I like to take it apart and put it back together. And that's how I know that I know it. So as much as I love astrology, I have to now learn all about astrology, understand everything that's going on. And then that adds another level of nuance to anything that I'm approaching, whether it's on a personal level or on a business level. So in the past few years, as I've been thinking about how I want to bring divination, intuition, spirituality into my business, I have a few factors to consider. One is that very human, sentient factor feels like it's missing in this space, much like the data-driven trend forecasting is not particularly my favorite. I also would encourage people to step away from the apps, one in particular that is giving people AI astrology and like really like feeds off of them, like getting upset and worried about it. Go to an astrologer, understand yourself more, understand your identity by having that human connection. I also like the idea of the work that I do in trend forecasting is very much in pattern recognition. And so isn't intuition and divination, right? Having conversations and doing readings, you're also recognizing things that are coming up for people often. So maybe in tarot, a certain card is going to follow them around for a little bit while they're working through an issue. And it's those patterns that help you to continue to evolve as a person. And then ultimately, I think that both divination and trend forecasting, you're getting to an identity, whether it's a brand's identity, how they're going to express themselves through marketing or through styling or through even copywriting, to how someone expresses their own personal brand through identity, through divination, through their astrological chart. When you understand your weaknesses, you can also really feed into them. And one of my healers says, feed your chart. Like you have to feed the parts of your chart that you don't like. You can't just ignore them and starve them. So I love that. And I think that that's it. It's like really understanding the whole picture, which is so delicious to me as, again, a Gemini moon.
So how does it work, I guess, in practice? Let's say you're working with a client and they're asking you, what do you think as like an expert trend forecaster, someone who's done this for many decades, like, what do you think like is going to be happening in the future? How should we drive our business direction? Like, do you pull tarot cards for them? Do you look at the company's astrology, the person's astrology? Like, how does it work actually, like in practice?
So this is something that's relatively new with my business. Okay. And am starting it by putting the information out there to those who are interested. The other thing that I think is important about divination and fortune telling is it's not for everyone. And I am very sensitive to where people are at. Not everyone wants to hear about their astrological charts or talk about astrology. Not everyone is comfortable having their cards read or exploring other kinds of modalities. Where I've been in experiences where I'm meeting people and they're asking me a lot of questions about the different modalities that I've explored or things that I know about. So I always go with the comfort level of whoever the end person is. For me personally, I think it's important to start putting the information out there in the ways that I see things so that people can also understand how it can work for them. For example, last week I posted on my social media and on some of my other channels about Uranus and Gemini being extremely important as we're looking at cowboy core. So there's been like years and years of Western wear and, you know, going back to that 2021, 2022 time period, maybe you were wearing like a pink cowboy hat with rhinestones on it and you were going to a Taylor Swift concert. We've already talked about Taylor Swift like 3 times. Which is so interesting.
And Beyonce too.
So last week when I posted about this, I was taking the Beyonce angle because that is very different. And it's very much speaking to where, you know, we saw that trend be sort of like a superficial, fun, you know, kind of, out there kind of styling, more whimsical, I would say would be the direction. There's a serious tone now to Western wear that we hadn't seen in years past. And I think Beyonce is a good example where you're seeing what we traditionally understood to be Western wear or cowboy kind of dressing. It also goes in alignment with this same Uranus in Gemini transit happens every 84 years. So post-Civil War, there was this transit. And that's when you were seeing cowboys really starting to go out west and you were seeing exploring the frontiers, you were seeing manifest destiny, but cowboys were wearing like, you know, flannels, they were wearing denim as a means of protection to be out and doing the things that they were doing. So this uniform that has been sort of claimed as an American style, like a symbol of Americana, is coming back. But we're also seeing that, you know, Uranus is a planet of disruption. Gemini is the way that we express ourselves. So there's this reclamation of what a cowboy looks like. You're seeing that there's trends in people going to dude ranches. You're seeing that there's trends in people doing queer line dancing. So what we're seeing from this transit that is going to be explored over the next 7 years is who's an American and like, what does a cowboy look like? And so that affects this trend in such a cool, interesting way to me that if you were the right end client and you were going to explore that, that would be something that, you know, I would present to you and say, like, here's evidence that here's how long this transit is going to be. There's other things that will come in to affect it, but just know this is the basis of it. And this is how people are going to be exploring this kind of styling.
That is so cool. Like, I love that you tie like something so historic to modern day using like astrology and like science like that. It's just like I've never heard someone talk about it and relate it back to astrology like that. Like that is so cool.
Thank you. I am about to post something fascinating with Sydney Sweeney, Cat's Eye. Like there is something really cool that needs to be paid attention to by marketing teams. You know, Pluto going into Aquarius is major about the collective. Like there's going to be less of a messaging around here's what one person is doing. Here's the standard. This is the one and only way. You know, you look at that Sydney Sweeney ad and it's problematic for many reasons, but it's really suggesting that like, this is it. This is the gene. This is the top. This is the person who's wearing it. And this is the way that you should look, you know, or else, right? Whereas you see Cat's Eye, and there's dancing and there's so many different people. And it's not even just, it's diversity, right? When you have that many people dancing or in an ad, you can actually see the retailer's entire collection being worn at the same time. So I'm not just looking at them. I'm like, there's wide leg jeans and there's skinny jeans and there's the little jean skirts. I know exactly what's going to be in the store just from watching that one ad. And maybe that's not the first thing you're thinking, but it is in the back of your mind while you're also like seeing joy in community and in the collective. So if I were a marketing person, I would really be focusing on large groups in marketing over the next, I guess it's going to be like 20 years for this transit or so.
Wow.
I'm watching your face.
No, it's so cool. I was just like it's a whole, like astrology. There's so much to learn about it. And I think it can be like, as someone who's like a very like basic astrology person, it's very intimidating because there's so much about each planet, so much about placements, so much about houses, which I wanted to ask you because your company is called 12th House. And so it's so cool to hear you talk about it because you're so well versed in it. And you do a great job at making like sort of the abstract very concrete. And so, yeah, I'm just like, holy shit, I'm learning so much.
You know, I will say it's a joy to watch your face as I'm talking about this. You know, this is the gift that I have in my own chart, is that I have come here to master the voice that makes people feel comfortable and that makes people know that they understand a concept that seems like it's beyond them. So when I say like, oh, I love to take things apart, if I don't know how to put it back together, and if I can't explain to you how to put it back together, then I haven't mastered it. I haven't learned it. And I truly haven't mastered. And another thing that I love about what I'm doing is it's not about me as the individual. It's about really this collective of people that I've built around me, and education and community. So as much as I love tarot, like ultimately I'm learning from the Roma and really getting into, you know, education and systematic racism that's happened to this group of people that has brought this divination into what we know today. And yet, while there could be anti-fortune telling laws on the books that keep people from working, you're seeing people do, you know, tarot spreads on TikTok or Instagram every day without acknowledging how much pain has been behind that as a practice. And I think that's it. It's really understanding that there's so much that we just see on surface level and being willing to get into the education of what we know. It's much like, okay, we know fast fashion is terrible, and we've started to peel back the curtains of understanding why it's hideous for the environment, the working conditions of the people that work in the factories, but also understanding that that happens everywhere. And we have to really be willing and open to bringing everyone into our communities. So it's, you know, learning astrology from seasoned astrologers, and even their different you know, the different practices that they work in. There's medical astrology, there's evolutionary astrology.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's fascinating, right? And so it's really just, it's so beautiful the more that you open up to understanding everything that's possible and adding that level of nuance and education as a pillar.
Yeah, for sure. Why did you name your company 12th House?
Oh, I'm such a contrarian. So one thing about me that I hate is when there is someone, let's say an astrologer or someone who has astrology knowledge, and they look at someone's chart and they go, oh, and they have some sort of judgment right off the bat of a placement that you have or something, and they say, oh, this planet is in detriment, or this. There's actually no bad charts, right? There's no wrong questions, and there's no bad charts. And I think that there's so much mystery around the 12th house. There's a lot of icky feelings around the 12th house. And I have a ton of placements in Pisces in the 12th house. So over the years, as I've been going through different practitioners and working with different healers, the reactions that I've gotten have been so interesting, like around those placements for me. And I think about it as if someone were to come to me and they were to say, you know, this is a spot of darkness that I have, or this is a challenge that I have, or this is a repeating pattern in my life, I wouldn't say like, oh, you should just give up. It's like done for you. You would say like, how can this empower you? How can you use this, what you consider a weakness, to become a strength for you? And how can you grow from it? And I think that that's just it. It's almost that contrarian spirit of being like, yeah, you know what? I am a 12th house person. I will say what's wonderful is it attracts a lot of other 12th house people, and they're always so wonderful. And we always have like this beautiful way of expressing ourselves, because the 12th house is the end. There can be like a lot of darkness there. There can be a lot of a lack of light. There can be a lot of shadow. And so these are people that really work hard to bring brightness into that. So
Cool.
yeah.
That's awesome. I'm
Yeah.
curious because you work so much in like fashion and which is essentially like how people present themselves or how they want to
Yeah.
present themselves to the world. Do you find any patterns between people's charts and how they like present in the world or
Oh,
like
yeah.
their style or vibe? Like what are
Yeah.
some of the patterns that you do see?
Oh my gosh. I would say, your Venus sign is often going to be a part of how you look or like how you express beauty. Um, for example, my Venus is in Aquarius, which is one of the weirdest placements that I have. And I'm not going to say there's no bad placements, but Venus in Aquarius, Aquarius is very much what I would call the alien of the zodiac. They don't mind to be weird. They don't they don't mind to be the outsider. They don't mind to be first. They're a very pioneering spirit, but they also are just like doing their own thing, like very, very different than everyone else. So Venus in Aquarius for me is also a huge part of how I do my job and how I see the world. So I love that placement for trend forecasting, because no matter what anyone else's judgment might be, or they want to have a thought about, oh, choose the go clonker, I'm like, no, I'm good. I really firmly believe in this. It feels so different than what you're seeing, but I feel it innately in my body and in my spirit. It's just so interesting because it can affect, the way that you want to dress. I would say that I don't necessarily dress like everyone else, even though I talk about trends. That's probably the last thing that you'll ever see me in. I might want to be really like sparkly one day and then like in a pair of clogs and, just it's so it's very different. Yeah, I would say your Venus sign really is how you present yourself. I haven't done a deep
Interesting.
dive for anybody yet, but I would love to on that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Something else you also do is you do styling
Oh
for, I
yeah.
saw on your website, you do a lot of like styling for different companies and also for, I guess someone could hire you, right? Like just a random
Oh
person.
yeah, I do
Or
a
like,
lot of styling. Yeah.
yeah. That's so cool. Like, I'm curious, what is your creative process and how does like styling fit into all the things that you do? Because I feel like it's both data might be the wrong word, but like you were talking about how it's like you prefer to work intuitively, which there's definitely probably an element to that, but there's
Yeah.
probably also like a science behind it, maybe, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Sure. I have worked on a lot of campaigns for a large trade show. And they work in the space that's, sort of like trend fashion. Um, I would say if I'm doing something more commercial, like a campaign for them or doing some studio work for them, that what would lead me is usually working with a concept, a story from the very beginning. So thinking about if we're targeting a certain market, like a certain region in the United States, what time of year, and then we can build a story that can also be used in other parts of their marketing. I have two philosophies. The first one is fantasy in the everyday. I always think it's fun to bring in a bit of whimsy and a little bit of play to everything that I do. And if you hire me, I'm not really doing like the very, like super chic, like super luxury, very unattainable kind of campaigns. That's not really my style. If you bring me on, you know that we're going to have a little bit of fun and, we're going to have some joy and we're probably going to have some feathers or something a little bit out there. But the second philosophy that I have in creating a campaign or even working with someone on an individual basis would be remember the why. So when I'm styling for something more editorial or something that's going to be commercial, the why is not me. The why is not anyone that's on the team. The why is the person that's going to be coming through the convention center and seeing a banner with that campaign. That person that's been saving the money to go to Las Vegas to go buy things for their store, they need to look at that banner, understand what the trends are, feel like it was totally worth the investment to come on the trip. I have a lot of onus as the stylist in creating that feeling through those images. It has nothing to do with my ego. It has nothing to do if I picked 15 outfits and everyone hated them. That is not the why. Same thing with personal styling. Is it somebody shooting pictures for their business? There's someone on my website who is a friend of mine who is doing a lot of press photos for her business, and she had just graduated to the next level, and it was expressing who she is in a way that still felt very commercial, that felt very professional, that felt very much like her, but also that she could see this image living in perpetuity every time that she had a press opportunity. And it felt relevant to the business that she's in, which is antique jewelry, but also to the modern times. There's a lot happening in one outfit. So it's coming back to that why and the end perception of where those images are going to live. So it's having my own point of view, but that's not the primary driving factor for anything, for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
What makes a good outfit, in your opinion?
I think that the secret to getting dressed is no one really looks at the clothes for the most part if you have really great accessories on. So I love a lot of jewelry, clearly. I love like anything that's exciting footwear wise. I'm not so much into bags, I will say, but I do like an interesting bag. You could really go seasons without buying anything new if you just have some interesting accessories going on. I think that the best outfits and the best looks are the ones that you feel really, really comfortable in. Like you're not overthinking, why am I wearing this? This doesn't feel like me. And I think that when you work with a stylist on a personal level, that person is extracting not only who you are in the comfort of your everyday, but also kind of who you aspire to be and who the next version of you could be if you push yourself a little bit. So, yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that there's so much like depth to creating, a look for whether it's a company or a person.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's clear you put like so much thought into it.
I do. Thank you.
Do you ever experience imposter syndrome?
Yes. My problem with imposter syndrome is it's normally too late. Like I've started doing something and maybe a couple of months into it, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Why am I doing this? And like, am I overextending myself, or am I the level of expert that I'm pretending to be? And I have to remind myself that a lot of thought goes into everything that I do. And I have to give myself credit where if there's something that's interesting to me, I don't just sort of, add it onto my resume or add it onto the services that I offer. There's been a lot of thought. And also my communities are very strong. And if I'm not the right person and I need backup, I'm going to call that person in. So I feel that anytime that the universe has thrown me into a situation where I'm seriously second guessing myself, like the double headbands in the New York Times, clearly you can see that is stuck with me. I had to remember, like, this is after 15 years of a career where I have spoken to many people and I have really been an expert and I am really an advocate for all of the right things that I'm standing for. And I'm not pretending to be anything that I'm not. I maybe wasn't ready for the spotlight. And I think that that's more what I feel is transitioning from being part of a large machine where I was a bit more anonymous into I am the spokesperson for my brand, everything that I do, all of the projects that I sign on for, and truly the work that I bring into this world and the thoughts and the writing that I bring into this world, it's me. And that's been more of the friction that I feel versus like being an imposter.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what would you say is the most challenging part of your work?
Explaining what I do. Picking a lane. I think, I had to get used to being first to market with an idea. And I'll also say this, a sensitivity that I have is that in trend forecasting and in divination, I think there's a shared sentiment that this is women's work. It's emotional labor. It's a feeling. I don't know that I've often had to really negotiate my pay or to make sure that I'm being valued on the level that I need to be, because it's, to some people, take it or leave it. not understanding that the emotion that makes the work so good is also sometimes not considered, as scientific or as solid or concrete. I have an excellent, impeccable track record. So I have really needed to put a stake in the ground and say, I'm not basing this in science. I'm basing this in sentience, and I'm good with that. Like, you as my client have to be good in it. I also, when we were talking about 12th house, again, being a bit of a contrarian, a client once called me the crystal ball lady, which was something that I found to be so derogatory. Kind of like, oh, how do you get your information from a crystal ball? Um, so, so that's it. It's really, you have to be so comfortable in yourself. And that has been not just a lifelong lesson, but especially in the past 5 years, having my own business, being comfortable in my self-value for sure.
That's incredible that, wow. Yeah. Cause I can imagine people not really fully understanding and wanting to pay you less or not
Mhm.
value, which is crazy. Cause if you're really good at your job, which you're clearly are, you have the power to like make a company millions because like they're sending like, if you're saying something's going to be in trend and then they send that to the production or the manufacturing line,
Yes.
like,
Oh, and
but
I've made many companies many millions of dollars. I have those receipts
you're a
for
valuable
sure.
investment.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm also having a front row seat to see how comfortable people are with themselves, and truly super successful businesses, and anyone that's a freelancer knows this. The best clients are the ones that hire you and then you don't hear from them until you do the end project. The ones that are micromanaging and second guessing, those are the ones that you're going to have a problem with, and they're going to nitpick. And I have, like I said, an impeccable track record, and I feel very comfortable in what I'm delivering. And I come back to that, remember the why. It's not about you and your company and your ego. It's about your end consumer and how you're going to not just give them the right product, but put the right messaging behind it and give them the confidence as a consumer. And trust me, if you have a CEO that's second guessing product deliveries, that's going to come through in every part of the process. So you really need to have this level of emotional regulation for I need everyone to be really calm and really comfortable. And I'll take the time to talk you through all of the steps so that everyone from the top down through the sales associates, like I said, back to my retail days, when I felt really comfortable with a new product and that I had been educated, I could sell it. And all of these skills have been intangible in my business.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, as such a creative person, right? Like, do you ever experience creative blocks or just times when you don't feel inspired?
I will say that that is not always a problem for me. A fun thing about me is that I'll get the ideas in little like spurts and normally very far in advance. So I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? And then I'll have to think on it for a long time. I think that really creative people need to get out of their head too. Like, I love doing things that are tangible. Like, I love like making things. I love decorating things. I love, doing that and using my hands and giving myself creativity outside of my head is how I can move through some blocks. And that to me has been really, really helpful. So normally it's like, it just needs more time to cook. And I'm like used to that by now. And I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. This is how we're gonna do it. Yeah.
For sure. And like we were kind of talking about before, sometimes the world of astrology and tarot readings, like there's so much to learn with all the different planets or all the different cards and the suits and the numbers.
Yeah.
So for someone who finds it interesting but doesn't know a lot yet, what would you recommend them like starting to learn about? Like, what's a good entry point for someone who's just entering this world?
Sure. I think that if you're really into astrology, um, getting into getting into understanding each of the signs, each of the houses, and looking towards people in the community that you resonate with their brand message. This is where also you can kind of translate from fashion into divination or astrology. just like you would buy certain brands because you like the voice, you like the styling, you like the way that it's put together, you like the marketing, you feel like you're aligned with that message, you should feel the same way with astrology or any kind of fortune telling. If something doesn't give you a good feeling, then you should really step away from that or that person or that channel. I think that there's a big problem in divination on social media where there's a lot of fear mongering, and those are people that I would say don't follow. Don't, if it makes you uncomfortable, if it makes you anxious, if it makes you want to come back to check to see, make sure you're not missing anything, if it's triggering something in you, that's not a good source of information. If you feel like you're learning, if you feel like you're getting the next level of education and that person is a helpful voice, then that's where you should be flowing into. And I think that when you start to look into different stylings of how people portray, how they talk about astrology, how they talk about tarot, I would also seriously encourage everyone to understand the roots of any of the practices that they're looking into and start really platforming and supporting those voices, because not only is there going to be tremendous knowledge that you can't get from someone who the information has been passed through, you need to also really give graciousness to the places and the people that these practices come from, for sure. So I would say just search out any educational platforms, that make you feel good and make you feel positive and like you're learning and not desperate to get through another day. And then also to really understand the roots of everything. It would be so interesting if someone would put together a platform with all of this information on it.
Wink, wink.
Wink, wink.
And as someone who is clearly an expert in the fashion space, could you give us some easy ways to improve our style just for like everyday people watching?
I want to say everyone looks really good. I think that there's so much judgment around the way that people dress, or they feel like, do I look good? I get that question a lot. Like, what does this look like to you? Or everyone has to be comfortable in the way that they dress. I think that the safest thing, and truly I do this, if you understand what your uniform is, if you understand silhouettes that look good on you and you buy versions of that and that becomes sort of your go-to look, I think a uniform is one of the best ways to establish your personal style instead of buying into trends and constantly feeling like you have to move with the times. Once you have that uniform dressing down, you can participate in the trends that feel really, really good for you or really aligned to what your personal vibe is or your aesthetic. Because if you're just participating and buying things into whatever is happening in the moment, you're never going to feel comfortable. You're never really going to know who you are or how you express yourself. And it's going to show, I think, in the way that you dress. So just having that core go-to wardrobe is so helpful.
Yeah. When you say uniform, do you mean like one particular type of clothing or something like that? Like for me, I love jumpsuits. Like I have a bunch of jumpsuits, for example, but for someone else that might be something. I don't,
Yeah, I think it's like, okay, if you're going to a store, you're probably looking for jumpsuits first, right? It's like in your mind, where other people they don't even see the jumpsuit because they're moving right past it. Identifying like what you feel comfortable within your body, the kind of shapes that you want to create with different silhouettes. Typically, like my uniform would really be like a short skirt and like an interesting top. Like that's kind of the balance that I always have. We're going to be on camera today, so I did for something longer, but that's what my uniform would be. So I sort of have 100 short skirts and then like all sorts of tops that have kind of like crazy things going on with them. That's what I would feel super comfortable with. But no matter what the trend is with material or color, you're going to see me sort of looking the same all the time. I also like a really oversized, interesting jacket. So I could wear 10 different outfits on 10 different days, but you might think I'm wearing the same thing over and over again because everything I buy tends to be the same look. Yeah, it's just sort of like, what do you gravitate towards and what makes you feel good every single time that you wear it? I will admit that I have one pair of jeans. I did not wear jeans from 2006 until 2019 or 2021. I forget. There was like 15 years that I did not wear jeans at all. once a year I would go to Barney's and try on every pair of jeans, and it just didn't work out for me. So it's funny when people see me in jeans now, they're like, whoa, where did that come from? So sometimes your tastes change even for basic things. But
yeah, for sure. What would you say is your definition of success?
Wow. You know, it's really timely that you would ask this too, because a new astrologer that I saw recently had said that this would be a question, not in this interview, but that would be coming up for me in life. And um, I think wherever you're at, to not necessarily know where you're going unless you're super hyper focused on this is the thing that I must do in this lifetime. This is the title I want, and I am on the path and the trajectory to that. It's success to me looks like, are you really doing what you came here to do? And I do a lot of divination work for people where we talk about their destiny points and all of the factors that are tied into what their soul came here to do. If you believe that that's what is in your chart. And it's interesting when you see, even if I have 15, 20 years in fashion, if there's a day where I'm fully in the spirituality and wellness space, I will not consider that a failure that I spent so much time in fashion. I truly believe that every step along the way is leading you to what this legacy is that you're creating for yourself. How are you building positivity in the world with the power that you have, with the privilege that you have, with the access that you have? How are you building a community of people around you that are also part of that success? How are you giving strength to other people? How are you satisfying what you are here to do? And you can't ever consider, if I looked at myself in 2020, I was in a low place. I was going through a divorce. I had lost my corporate job. I had never been unemployed before. And I was truly wondering, am I a failure? But I look back on that and I can't believe that I've had my own business for 6 years, that I've created this portfolio of work, that I've also stood in that and said, yeah, but you know what? I still haven't done anything with this spirituality angle that I love, or wellness, or bringing access into that in the way that I think it needs to be in the world. So I am still pivoting all the time. And to me, that's what success is. It's like not to be so attached to an outcome, but really to understand that you're an instrument of something so beautiful that you came here to do, and never really lean into that imposter syndrome too much, because you never know the roads that you had to take to like learn the lessons and meet the people to get you there.
Absolutely. It's so, that's so beautifully said. And
Thank
it's
you.
so reassuring for someone like me to hear, as someone who's like a couple of years behind you in terms of like starting my own business and starting my own thing. And that I'm not like, it sounds like you were in a very similar life place as I am now. I mean, I'm not going through a divorce, but there's other things, and like
Yes.
just kind of like not knowing what the fuck I'm doing. So it's very reassuring to see you as like 6 or 7 years out, successful, like having gone through that hard time, and in a way grateful for it, and because it brought you to where you are now. So that's really reassuring to hear.
Yeah. And what do they say? It's like comparison is the thief of joy. And to never look at where someone else is, because you don't know what their destined path is. You don't know what they're here to do, what they're here to activate, what their role is. You don't know the things that are still coming in for you to give you a skill set. I have a really close friend who laughs at me so much because he's always saying like, you're so attached to chronological time. Because for me, as an intuitive person, timelines are very strange for me. I experience time in a very different way, thinking about trends that are 2 years out. The flow of time is my enemy, because I'm like, why isn't it here now? But the more I become comfortable in thinking, okay, I need to be able to do this so that I can then do this. And then I needed to meet this person. So I think you can't ever compare where anyone else is. You have to really just stand in your sovereignty and say, okay, here's what I'm here to do. I also find, truthfully, that's where I think astrology is so helpful, is to understand the different activations that you have to experience. For me, Saturn is a big part of my chart, and it's just loving to go slow. So sometimes that is my worst enemy.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
Jessica, this has been so interesting. I feel like I learned so much from you. I have a ton of
you.
things to Google now. It's like so cool. Are you ready to move into the lightning round?
Oh my gosh, sure. Yes.
What is something new that you've tried lately?
Oh, ooh, maybe I wasn't ready for this. I'm actually going to see a medium tonight, and I've never done that before. So that is something new that I'm trying.
Ooh.
I'm always trying to new like healing modalities and different forms of fortune telling.
So cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
exciting. Do you have a lesson or a message that you want to share with listeners?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to say it again. Remember the why. Like, it's not about you. Remember why you're doing it. Yeah.
What is one thing you wish you knew when you were first starting out?
Don't get attached to the outcome. And also you will pivot 900,000 times. And that transformation is your road. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank you.
show. Where can everybody find you? Check out your work, book a reading with you, or book what's it called? A styling appointment?
Yes.
I don't know what the proper
yeah.
word is, but where can everyone support your work and check you out?
You can go on my website. It is called the12th.house with a 1 and a 2. And I'm very, very chronically on Instagram. So I am Jessica, the letter X, RICH on Instagram.
I love it. All right. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you. This was so fun.